Hi everyone, my name is Tristan from Plascon Plastics. Today we're going to be talking about how to create a product from scratch or how to create a brand from scratch. I do work here at Plascon Plastics. I do product development and marketing, but I also do work outside of Plascon Plastics. And I thought that this would be kind of an interesting video because we made a video recently about the Linus Tech Tip screwdriver, kind of talking about the manufacturing process there. And then a lot of people found it interesting. Now this video is going to be a little bit different than the other videos on YouTube. I do want to talk a little bit more about numbers. Numbers can be so vague sometimes in these videos because it really depends on what product you're making, right? But I do want to say some numbers here and there because I think it's important for people to really understand. And me being in this industry in general, I get tons of questions from families and friends, or they'll be like, oh, I had a great idea. Can't we just make this and sell it online? And this video is going to be kind of the pessimistic version of the reality of creating products, just so you know and you don't waste your money on something that might not work or might not sell. Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about various different types of products. There's a few avenues you might want to take when creating a new product. Okay, the first avenue is creating a simple product, a simple plastic product, a simple metal product. It could be something simple like this pot, right? This pot is a very simple product and you might want to create something like that. Now, when it comes to something like this, your biggest hurdle is going to be manufacturing and distribution, because everyone, and when I say everyone, I mean like the big players in China, overseas, all those guys can make this pot for super cheap, pennies, like tenths of pennies. The next thing is going to be the complex, the multi-layered products. That's going to be stuff like this computer. It could be stuff like headphones. It can be even stuff like food, right? And in these situations, your main hurdle or your main advantage, it could be, right, is going to be assembly and partnerships, right? You're going to be dealing with different people to assemble a headphone together. The reason why that's hard is because trying to get all these bits and pieces, the driver for the headphone to make sound, the foam for the headphone, or around the ear, all this type of stuff, you have to kind of source individually and assemble it together. Obviously, that's a big struggle. But because that is harder to do, right, you don't necessarily have to compete on price as hard as something like a simple product like that. So you might be able to get away with lower minimum order quantities, or MOQ, lower quantities, because you can make a more complex product and sell that product for a higher price point. Now, the next thing that's pushed hard on the internet or e-commerce is private labeling. Private labeling is when you get a product and you just stamp your name on it and sell it. So in this case, a lot of people buy stuff from things like Alibaba or AliExpress. They put their name on it and they'll sell it on Amazon. Private labeling is basically what happens in drop shipping, and it's what happens with Amazon. A lot of cheap Amazon products are going to be just private labeled. Now, the reason why this can be good is because you don't have to manufacture, you don't have to distribute really as hard. It's definitely a lot easier to get into. But because it's easier to get into, you got that flip side of now your biggest challenge is marketing, right? If everyone's private labeling the same headphones and they're all the exact same, then how do you sell it to people, right? So that's kind of an issue. You can do kind of a little bit of a twist with your private label product. For example, you might have headphones, again, that you are buying overseas for cheap. You're putting your own brand name on it. And also you're getting the manufacturer to use more premium leather around the band. So everything remains the same, but you get premium leather on the headphone, right? So this makes your headphone look a little bit different. And this cost is still low, right? And then you just market it and it's a little bit different. So that's kind of an avenue a lot of people take. The last product I'm going to touch on is the application-based products. And this is something when you see an opportunity in one area and you see that this product can be used for something else other than what it's being used for, and then you private label it, you put your own brand name, and you sell it as a totally different thing. An example of that is this product here called Wrap and Save. It's kind of a failed product that I worked on. So Wrap and Save was a product by Plascon Plastics, and essentially it is just carpet tape, right? Like commercial carpet tape. And what you can do with it is, normally carpet tape comes in huge rolls. If you chop it in half, you basically get like this, it's like saran wrap on steroids. It's like super, super sticky. So if you put a paintbrush in the Wrap and Save and fold it, the paintbrush is gonna stay wet for a long, long time. And this is one of the best products I've ever used. I've painted this room with paintbrushes, but haven't had time to do it all in one day. So I was able to put in Wrap and Save, and the paint is wet, and you can save paint, and you save your paintbrush, and it's all fine and dandy. But this didn't work, and I'll explain a little bit why in a minute. So this is an example of a product that's great. It works. Everyone who uses it loves it, but it didn't work as a product. It doesn't work as a competitive product, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The next thing is I want to touch on understanding pricing models. Before you kind of even make your product, like start sketching it out, I know a lot of these videos are like, okay, the first thing you want to do when you have an idea is sketch your different designs. It's like, no, the first thing you want to do is figure out if your product is even viable. Don't sketch 100 designs to get renders done if your product's not even viable. So what are the pricing models that you want to look at? Okay, you want to look at what your product is. What are the substitutes for that product? Not just what are your competitors, like direct competitors doing the same thing. Could you find a product that totally avoids the need for yours? For example, for the wrap and save idea, like there's no other real competitor like this on the market, right? So it seems cool. But what are the other options of consumers? Well, they could just throw their paintbrushes away. That's an option. They could wash their paintbrushes. That's an option. So these are also your competitors. They might not be your product competitors, but they're the different options that your consumers have. And those are, you should see them as your competitors, right? You should pretend that those things are your competitors in order to create a product that's actually going to sell, that people are actually going to want to take their money out of their wallet and buy it, okay? So when it comes to pricing, a lot of new products are going to be better off if you are targeting that higher premium quality market. And the reason why is to play in the commodities market or the lower tier product market, such as these pots, like the distribution and the supply chains for those pots have been around for so long that they're so cheap that it doesn't really matter what you do. Even if you like create a pot like this that 99.9% of the people thinks is more attractive than whatever's on the market, your cost to make that and sell it is going to be so much higher than anyone else because they're manufacturing it for pennies. So to play in that commodities market is a lot harder, or that lower tier kind of dollar store type market is a lot harder than trying to compete in that higher quality premium market. Now, I'm not talking about luxury goods, but what I'm saying is if you're making an existing product, say there's already products on the market, right? And you're making an existing product, rather than kind of exist in the middle or exist in the cheaper end, finding kind of that higher end area will probably, or generally will yield you a little bit better luck. Okay, now where to start? Now, before you kind of pitch your idea, before you draw your idea 100 times, find out all the competitors. First things first, find out the competitors that actually exist. So find out who makes products similar, who's in the industry, see what they're selling it for, see if they also look like they're making money, right? If they don't look like they're making money, then chances are like you trying to go into that industry is very hard. You know what I mean? That's not always the case. For example, Uber was Magic Cab, Magic Cab, wasn't making money, and then Uber got really big. Funny thing is, Uber, I still don't think is making, I don't know how profitable they are, but I know they have their struggles. But it's kind of the same thing if you're making a product, right? If you're looking at the product and it looks like these companies are a little stagnant, they're not doing anything, ask yourself why. If your competitors are absolutely killing it, right? Killing it, ask yourself why. Is there room for you to take some market share? Or is that company doing so well, it's just dominating, crushing everyone else, right? So these are the things that you want to talk about, understanding your competitors. Next up, you have to find out whether or not you personally think you could sell something. Regardless of how great your product is, it doesn't really matter if you don't know how to sell something. And when I talk about that, I mean, do you have video marketing skills yourself, or do you have people that can help you with that? Do you have photo marketing skills and people that can help you with that? Do you have social media skills? Do you have ads skills? Okay, have you worked with Facebook ads before? Have you worked with Google ads before? Have you worked with Google Shopping ads, Google Merchant, right? Things like that. Have you built a website before? Do you want to sell your product e-commerce, like on your own website? And if so, have you built your website before? Have you built any website? Do you know anyone who can build a website? Payment processing systems, for example, things like Stripe, Interact, Square, these payment processing systems, are you familiar with them? Are you familiar with SEO? Are you familiar with blogs? Are you familiar with writing copy for your website? Do you understand the pain of return policies, security and reliability of the website, packaging? Do you know how to package a product? Do you have people that could package your product? Distribution. Are you going to have everything in your garage, in your house, or are you going to have to source out someone to distribute your product? And fulfillment and shipping, right? So have you shipped anything? Do you even know how much shipping would cost for your product? Have you looked into the cost? So all of these things are things that you have to look up before you even really consider creating your product. A lot of people want to create a product, but they don't think that far ahead. And these are the things that all your competitors are doing. So you need to have money in the bag ready to build a website and to work on advertising campaigns and stuff like that. So just some things to take into account when you're starting out, right? So if you do think you can conquer all those mountains, then what are your next steps? Well, if you haven't sold anything before, this is your first time creating a product, ask yourself, like how you want to sell it, right? For example, if you're going to be selling online, what's the easiest way to get experience selling something online? In my opinion, it's probably something like eBay. A good little exercise for you is to find something in your industry and try to sell it on eBay. I know that kind of sounds kind of stupid and silly, but doing something like that will give you a lot of experience without even knowing it. For example, if you want to create headphones, go down to your local Best Buy or your electronic shop or whatever, buy whatever headphones on discount. If there's a Door Crasher sale, buy that, right? Buy some Dr. Dre Beats or something, whatever. Go home and sell that product on eBay. Don't try to make a profit. Just see if you can even sell a single product on eBay for a general decent price. And the reason why I would say to do this exercise is because there's a lot of things in business that you need to have like the skills before you develop a product, right? And just trying to sell one single thing is a lot harder than people realize. Like trying to sell it well, right? And so if you can take your Dr. Dre Beats and you can take a photo of it, you might learn, oh my God, like taking a photo with a crisp white background is actually a lot harder than I thought it was gonna be, right? And then putting it on eBay, you have to fill in all the item specifications. You're like, oh wow, if I sold a bunch of different headphones or if I created a bunch of different products, I would have to write item specifications on my website for everything. That's a lot of work. Then you have to write the item description, right? So write the item description. Then if you sell your product that you're selling on eBay, then you have to print a shipping label and drive to the post office and drop it off. And that would be your first product. And that would kind of give you an idea of selling something for the first time. If you're completely new to selling things online or selling things in general, that kind of gives you the idea of how hard things can be to sell, which can be a little tricky. And in that case, you're not even dealing with manufacturing, you're not even dealing with distribution, you're not even dealing with marketing because the Beats by Dr. Dre is already marketed. That's just the selling portion, right? And so those are the things that you might want to learn before you even start drawing your product and trying to get it manufactured. Now, the reason why I mention this is not necessarily because I think all of you should do that, should sell something on eBay, but it's kind of a metaphor for kind of figuring out, I want you to kind of figure out what you don't know and try to attack that head on in the easiest way you possibly can. People tend to avoid things they don't know, but in business, when you're creating a product, when you're creating a brand, you have to know everything and you have to know everything extremely well, right? You can't just know your product and what it's used for and not know how to market it, not know how to get retailers, not know how to ship it, right? You need to know at least a little bit of these things so you can kind of have these conversations with people in these industries so you can kind of lead your team and business people going forward. If you just know very specifically about your product, so back to the headphone example, if you're an audiophile, right, you create the best sounding headphones, it's an acoustic dream per se, that's cool, and you might try to avoid the other things you don't know. You just might want to keep on diving deep and make it a better, make it the best sounding headphone possible. But with the eBay example, I want you to look at, okay, what are the things I don't know and how do I tackle those head on? If I don't know how to build a website, let me build a little Squarespace blog, right? If you've never shipped anything before, sell something on eBay and ship it out. Learn those things before you dive deep into what you do know. You need to learn what you don't know first. Now, we finally get to product design. When you're ready to actually produce the product, what are you gonna be looking at? Okay, so plastic on plastics, we're gonna talk about plastics, obviously. you want to look at different types of plastics and different type of materials. You're also going to need engineers, so plastic engineers. These people are going to help you create the product. Now, you might look at your product, you might be like, oh, this is a pretty simple product, I don't need an engineer. But the thing is, to make the manufacturing process for the product, like the injection mold for the injection molding machine, right? And trying to figure out where the coolant goes and how this mold and how these products are pushed out of the mold and stuff like that. You're going to need someone with engineering background if you don't have it already. And that's obviously going to cost a good amount of money. So in order to do that, in order to reach out to these engineers, or for them to take you seriously, you're going to want to draw all your iterations of your product that you might want. And a good idea is actually to draw those iterations and then get them rendered on Fiverr pretty cheaply. And if the person on Fiverr doesn't render it like exactly to how you want, don't worry, because you're just giving them random sketches. But these really draft renders is just for you to go to an injection molding factory. It's just for you to go to a manufacturing facility and at least show them kind of what's in your head. What's in your head could be extremely clear for you, but for the people manufacturing, they need a little more detail to see if that can even work in a manufacturing mold, in an injection mold, right? And so getting some renders done that are just kind of like roughly what's in your head transported to the paper so you can show people is a good cheap first step, rather than just going to manufacturing, kind of explaining verbally what you think would be cool. The next phase would be the actual engineering phase. Say your engineers and say your design teams decide that we can make this product. Then you're going to have to figure out how to optimize that product. Now, in some cases, this could be something as easy as a clothing line and, doing things like tailoring this pants or whatever and chopping things up, trying it new. But in some things, it could be really, very complicated. For example, an injection mold is very expensive. And once you produce it, you can't really alter it. It's etched, carved into hardened steel, right? And so engineering phase of making things for injection molding can be quite long and tedious. Now, because it's long and tedious, when it comes to producing plastic products, there are some cheaper ways to go about things, such as 3D printing, plastic welding, CNC routing, stuff like that. These things, you can make a plastic product without injection molding it. You could plastic weld something and carve it and shape it and sand it in kind of a way you might want. And that's maybe going to cost you a few $100s for a product, whereas in injection molding it, it's going to cost you like $1 per unit. But to injection mold something, you need a huge order quantity. And so when you're just prototyping, doing things like 3D printing or plastic welding is going to be kind of your first step, right? So you're going to work with the engineers and you're going to do the plastic welding or the 3D printing of a thing that you think that could be injection molded, right? You're not just trying to create your idea anymore. That's done in the render phase. Now you're trying to create your idea in person, in a shape, in a way that can be manufactured and shipped effectively. Now, during this prototyping phase, you're eventually going to come up with a prototype that is probably pretty similar to what you actually want, like what can actually be made and what you actually want, right? And this is when you can look into crowdfunding or like something like a Kickstarter to start marketing your product. You can use this prototype if it looks almost identical to what you're actually going to be producing, to start marketing your product and seeing if you can get the crowdfunding necessary to build the manufacturing pipeline or the manufacturing line required to make the product. So now let's talk about like money for a second, since we're talking about Kickstarter. Kickstarter, I see a lot of campaigns, like they want to raise $27,000, $25,000, something like that, and they raise $100,000, right? These are the really good ones. A lot of Kickstarter campaigns don't actually work, but Kickstarter is really good because you can actually see if people are interested in the product. So if it does really well, then people are probably pretty interested in the product, which is good. It's like advertising the product and selling the product before you even have the product. And that's the best way to do product research, period. That being said, if you have like a threshold to meet on Kickstarter, let's say your threshold is $25,000, you can surpass that, but is $25,000 enough? So you might be able to reach your threshold, right? But a lot of people kind of forget how much money it costs to do the manufacturing and the shipping and the website and the blah, blah, So I kind of want to run through that now. So let's talk about injection molding specifically. Injection molding will cost you $10,000 to $15,000 per cavity. Okay, so what is injection molding? First of all, it's when you shoot molten plastic through a tube into a big steel cased mold, right? And the liquid plastic fills the inside of the mold, and then it dries and cools, and the mold is separated, and now you have this product and it falls out. Okay, this typically is the cheapest way to make anything out of plastic. Okay, now most injection molds are gonna have multiple cavities, right? For smaller products, it's gonna be 4, 6, 12, 24, maybe 64 cavities for very small products, right? And it's gonna cost you about $10,000 to $15,000 per cavity, depending on how complex the product is. I mean, you can make a single cavity mold, especially if it's a higher end product, but most of the time down the line, your unit cost is not really gonna be cheap at all. If you have a single cavity mold, it's not going to be worth it. So you're going to be wanting to make maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cavity mold. If you go to where most molds are made in the world, which is Shenzhen in China, they are going to also have a minimum cavity threshold. So they're not going to just make you like a giant mold with a single little cavity, right? They're going to have a minimum on that. And so most molds are going to be multiple cavities and are going to cost you roughly $100,000. Many injection molds can cost you maybe $250,000, especially if you don't get the mold right on the first time. You might need that mold to be remachined, rethought out, and therefore that's going to cost you some more money, and therefore your bill can easily stack up to $300,000 for a very simple product, okay?
How can it take 3 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to make something so seemingly basic?
And that is something that is not talked about enough, and that's why I'm talking about it now. Because if you make $25,000 on your Kickstarter campaign, or maybe even if you blow it out of the water and you make $100,000 on your Kickstarter campaign, that's enough for the mold. A single mold, that's enough for a single mold. It is not enough for anything else. It's not enough. It's not enough for you to pay the injection mold to even make it. That's just the mold. It's not enough for you to market it, for you to ship it, and blah, blah, blah. That's also not enough for you to tweak the mold should something go wrong, and things always do. So I would say if you want to make something out of plastic, you need to be really, really confident that you can sell a lot of units to get your money back quickly, or you need to be really flexible with the capital investment that you're investing. You need to have, an extra $300,000 ready to go before you start the whole prototyping phase to even begin with, in cash, like ready to go. Otherwise, you're just gonna drown yourself into debt, and you might have a mold that's half finished and prototypes that are somewhat okay and stuff like that if you try to do this stuff on a budget. And there's a reason why that they say 9 out of 10 businesses fail, and it's because of these unforeseen costs. Now, other unforeseen costs are going to be, I guess we already talked about manufacturing, but also shipping, okay? In the shipping kind of area of this video, let's talk about it a little bit. So this is another product here that was created at Plascon Plastics. This product is like 10 years old. We just found it at the back of the warehouse, and I was like, oh, I can sell that. Okay, so this is hush pads rather, and they go underneath a washing machine to prevent the washing machine from rattling around. Now, this is way before I started with Plascon Plastics, and as you can see, the product packaging is literally not the best. Apparently it was done quite cheaply, and there's like this really pixelated dog here. There's the US and Canada flag it's neither made in Canada, it's neither made in the US. Like it is made in Canada, but it says made in North America, so I guess they wanted to incorporate both Canada and the US and then made in North America, but it's made in Canada. And then, we got these really pixelated guys here. So this is an example of packaging costs. that were unforeseen. So all the money went into making the pads themselves, making the injection mold for the rubber vibration pads, and there was not enough money to create proper packaging. And so here we have subpar packaging. And so when the company, I guess Plascon Plastics 10 years ago, which is totally different than the company it is now, it went to try to sell this to Home Depot and stuff like that, they're obviously not going to take you seriously because the packaging is so mediocre. This ended up not being able to sell to Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever, packaged up and being stored in the facility with kind of an unknown next step plan. We found these recently at Plascon Plastics and we're like, oh, I guess they still have a bunch. And so I took these and then I repackaged them into this. Wow, really nice packaging here. It's literally like plastic Ziploc bag with a little business card in it, right? Now, why did I package things like this? It's because I looked at the space, right? I looked at the space. I looked how much it might cost to repackage these into nicer packages, right? And I saw that no one had capital to do it, and it was kind of a risk, and people didn't want to see if they could repackage this and bring it to Home Depot. Or I didn't want to put money into this and bring it to Home Depot because there are also competitors that compete in this space, and that's something that I was trying to consider. So I was like, okay, which space can I compete in? Okay, I can compete in the e-commerce space. How do I compete in the e-commerce space and actually make it profitable? Well, I need to absolutely decrease any weight and any size for shipping. And that's what this package kind of presents itself as. So the rubbervibrationpads.com website where we sell these now is a decently looking modern website, right? And we are able to ship these for quite cheap because of the new packaging that it's in. And these are kind of the things that you have to consider. I would say shipping is one of the biggest killers for e-commerce marketing. If you have a product that you're selling for 50 bucks, and everyone wants free shipping these days, and it costs you 20 bucks for you to produce this product, and it's costing you, $10 in Google ads per product to have a conversion, right? So that's 30 bucks. And it's costing you another 10 bucks to, run your website and pay the people required to build the website, post to social media, actually advertise it. It's also, there's some other costs, like for example, warehousing, might cost on average a few dollars per product, right? So now you're only making $10 on your $50 product, right? So if shipping is 10 bucks, you've officially created a product that makes you zero money. Yeah, the other thing is if you want to get around the shipping, you can also go the retailer route. And the retailer route is kind of an interesting dilemma because then you are going to be spending more on packaging for the retailer to be able to sell it, right? For the people, the consumers to be educated. Now, there are a few things that you're going to have to consider when you're going to retail, and I don't think they're talked enough. And that is understanding what the retailer wants. Okay, so if you go into the retail environment and you have a product that competes with other products, but yours is better, because you're new to the market, because you don't have the economies to scale, because you're not making as many as your competitors, overseas. Obviously, if you make headphones, how are you going to compete with Bose that are making millions of headphones, right? Yours are probably going to be more expensive. You still have to remember that you have to make the retailer happy. Making the retailer happy is just as important as making the consumer happy. So how do you make the retailer happy? Well, you need to make sure that they're getting a good margin on that product. So this is where things get really, really tricky. If you are selling headphones again and you're competing with Bose, and let's say Bose has a $100 headphone, right? They're producing it cheaper than you, right? So they're selling it to the retailer generally at 50% below. So they're selling the headphone for $50 and the retailer is selling it for $100. So the retailer gets $50. Now, if it's costing you to make a very similar headphone $85, because obviously you're making a lot fewer, but your headphones is about the same as the Bose, but it looks a little cooler, it's a little more fresh and hip, right? So you want to sell yours for also $100. Well, you go to the retailer and you say, well, if you sell my headphone, you're going to get a $15 profit for every headphone that you sell, which is pretty good, right? Well, no, because even if your headphone kind of has a different niche as the Bose headphones, the retailer is making more money selling the Bose than yours. So they're gonna put your headphones at the back of the pile, hidden down below in the worst place in the store, because they don't want to cannibalize their own sales. They don't want to sell your product. They want to sell the products that's making them the most money. So in that case, you have to sell it for higher and you have to take less margin. So now you have to find out, how are you going to sell that product at a certain price point where people are want to buy it, but the retailer is making just as much money as they are selling your competitors. And because you're obviously at a higher cost, this often leads to you making no money whatsoever. The other only way that you can get retailers to be happy selling your product is if your product is so new and so hip that even if your retailers are making less money on your product than they are selling competitors, your product is bringing customers to the store that wouldn't normally come to the store, and that's the other way of making your retailer happy. So you have to remember, when you're selling to a retailer, yeah, they could theoretically make money on your product, but that's not what you're selling. You want to either be bringing more customers into their store or making more margin on your product than your competitors. And that right there is easier said than done. So to end this video, I want to talk about this product here, the Wrap and Save, and why it is such a good product and why it didn't work. The packaging is fairly good. It's quite bright. It's quite easy to understand. Everyone who gets this product, there's diagrams here, make it easy to understand. Now, I'm not taking credit for this because I did absolutely zero in terms of the Wrap and Save, right? Wrap and Save also predated me at Plascon Plastics. But this is quite an old product. Now, it is a great product, and everyone who has painted before knows the struggle and thinks that this is a great solve. And I've given so many of these little things away, so many of these boxes away to people who want it because we have so much overkill stock at Plascon Plastics. Now, the reason why it didn't work is a few things. We wanted to sell these at around $12 to $15, and after we took into shipping and the weight and everything and the production of this product, is we found that we would obviously, at selling at $14 or $12, you generally give the retailer 50% margin. So that is $6. And so we would have to figure out a way to produce these for $6. Now, to produce these cost a few bucks and stuff like that. So there was just not enough real margin for us to sell it. Now, if we could sell this at a higher price, like $20, but we were already struggling to sell them at $12, maybe we could have made it work. But because we were already struggling at $12, trying to find that margin for us for it to be worthwhile was quite difficult. You know, after you pay the shipping and after you pay the product itself and the packaging and shipping it to the store, right, and getting it landed, if you're making overseas, getting it landed, that was roughly about a few dollars per unit. And if we had to make $6 per unit, there just wasn't enough margin for it to really make sense for us. Another reason why is people found that they kind of walked past it and they didn't really think they needed it. They would walk past it in the store, right? And one of these things here can easily save you $20, $30, $40, $50 in terms of brushes, right? But they just felt like we found that people, they didn't know really what it was, and they just got their paintbrush, they got their tray, they got their rollers, they got their paint, and trying to sell them on other stuff, like painter's tape and stuff like that is good, and you know, they buy that stuff. And then the accessories is actually, if they've never seen it before, it's really hard for them to kind of pick it up and actually look at it and then actually buy it, right? Now, the interesting thing is that the people who did buy it, they loved it, but we created these Wrap and Save rolls, and you get 33 feet of this Wrap and Save saran wrap stuff per roll. And so that was also too much. Now, we wanted to give people a lot because it's better for the environment if we give them a lot, so they don't have to rebuy it again, so we don't have to ship as many and stuff like that. We want to give people a lot so they feel like they got their money's worth. But once they bought it, or once they bought 2 rolls, they're covered for like the next 20 years because you're not painting your house that much. We wouldn't get the return customers. And we honestly gave them too much. It'd be like giving someone who's buying soup like 50 gallons of soup. Like, you just don't need that much, and they'll never buy your product again because they always have it in the closet. And it's the same thing with this. So these are like kind of the problems that you're gonna come into contact with when you're producing your product. Might not be the exact same, but these things that you never even consider. And so with us, in terms of selling the Wrap and Save, we weren't finding that we were getting enough sales. We weren't finding that we were getting the repeat customers, right? And for whatever reason, people weren't wanting to buy it. They just didn't know what it was. They were confused by it somehow, and they didn't want the product. Even though everyone I've talked to and has used the product, that I've given the product, thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread, no one wanted to buy it. In this case, say the minimum order quantity of these big boxes here was 1,000, right? And this whole thing would cost you 20 bucks, or maybe more, maybe like 30 bucks to make and ship, get it landed here in North America, right? You have to make at least 1,000 or 2,000. That's 60,000. Well, if you send these to the stores and the stores are like, oh, well, they're not really selling that well, whatever, the colors, people aren't, understanding it, you have to repackage it, boom, that's a huge cost that you have to get ready for, to get ready to repackage everything, get ready to change and alter your product. And that's why a lot of these products like this, or products that people make, kind of just end up dying on the vine because they aren't considering these other kind of possibilities. Another reason why this didn't work is we tried to do the e-commerce route, but because of the shape being just long and skinny, it's hard to put it in a box, and it's hard to put it in an envelope and stuff like that. And the shipping cost, just based on the dimensions of most shipping companies, was kind of expensive. So again, if we're selling one roll online for $12 and it's costing us $15 to ship it, or $10 to ship it, and then covering that cost ourselves eradicates any margin that we have. And so these are the types of things that you do have to consider. So thank you for watching the most pessimistic video on product design possible. I hope you have a good day. I hope it helped, and have a good one.